Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 337, and today's guest is Gloria Hwang, founder and CEO of 1000. Gloria's career has centered around mission-oriented initiatives and companies, starting at Habitat for Humanity, then to Tom's, which is the gold standard in terms of businesses with a social mission based on their one-for-one model. She joined the company in its early years and played several key roles while there. As the founder of 1000, a public benefit corporation, Gloria named the company after an initial goal of saving 1,000 lives, which they have passed, by making a bike helmet that consumers will actually enjoy wearing. The inspiration of the company came from a tragic story of a coworker who passed away from a bike accident in New York City. When you think of it, the category of bike helmets hasn't really evolved in terms of style and functionality. What started out as a Kickstarter project, then fast forward to today, 1000 has brought a new level of style and innovation to a category that has been stagnant forever. And it is working. The company continues to grow aggressively and has been expanding into other categories, like the launch of its 1000 Junior collection. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like a deep discussion around building a company that is mission and community focused, Gloria's background story, and her mentality as a builder that started out as a child, which was influenced by her father, who started the robotics program for NASA, her experience at Tom's, including playing a key role in building out their nonprofit and giving programs, and what it was like working very closely with Blake Makowski, the full lifecycle story of 1000, including how she got started from designing the product to manufacturing to building a brand, how they decided to expand their product line based on feedback from existing customers versus trying to build out new markets, starting the company with a bootstrap mentality and how that helped the company over the long run, and so much more. Okay, quick side note, this is exciting. We launched a brand new offering at VentureFizz this week called VentureFizz Communities. I've always wanted to build in another layer to VentureFizz that connects people together in different job functions, as it just makes sense for us. The first community that we are building is focused on product management. It is an invite-only community that will provide product managers with the opportunity to grow their network, learn from each other, have access to a centralized library of product resources, job opportunities, events, and more. If you are a product manager, go to venturefizz.com/communities to request an invite. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Gloria. Gloria, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
I'm excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about the great company that you've been building called 1000, and it's just a great company that has a very compelling mission behind it. And then there's a powerful community that's also part of what you've built with your company, which that's where I wanted to start our conversation out. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have aspirations to build a meaningful company that has a social mission and a community that's really helping propel and lift it up. But not all founders can pull that off. So I wanted to talk to you about, your success there.
Yeah, I would say, and I appreciate that. I would say, maybe where it started for us is we weren't necessarily trying to orchestrate anything in the beginning. Our goal is always just to treat our community well and our customers well. So maybe that's probably the first place I'd start. From the very beginning when we launched 1000, here's an example. We launched as a Kickstarter project, and we had kind of major production challenges and delays at the very beginning. And we were really appreciated to everyone who supported us. So we were really good to make sure we were always updating folks along the journey. So no one was mad. People were just happy to follow along and wanted to know what's going on. And even when we sent the products, we wrote a handwritten note to everyone. Like, I think there was like probably 3,000 or 4,000. So at the time, me and a couple folks, just wrote handwritten notes to everyone. We sent free gifts. We weren't trying to orchestrate community building or being viral or anything like that. I think at the heart of it, our intention was always just to treat people well. And I think that's probably permeated and grown as 1000's grown. So kind of getting back to being community oriented. I don't know if we were trying to orchestrate anything. I think we were just trying to treat people nicely that supported us. And that kind of continues to be a theme at our company.
Well, and I think that's the key. You need to be authentic. You can't just be like, we're going to set out to build a community and pull this off. No, it needs to be organic. It needs to be a natural flow of what is created by the business. And I've been involved with Kickstarter programs, and you've read some that, missed their shipping or was delayed, and it was crazy and it was chaos. But then the ones that were upfront and communicated because there was one that I was involved in where they just communicate with me and you're like, okay, sure. It takes a while to build what you're building. And I understand there's going to be some delays. So as long as you're upfront and communicating, I think the consumer is probably going to be understanding.
Yeah, I think that was definitely the case with us. Like, I think we were really religious about doing monthly updates. And even if there wasn't much to update, we just told people not much to update, but here are the things going on in the background. And people just appreciate it. I think that's the thing. If you're asking people to support you, and I think that's what you are doing when you ask a consumer to buy a product. Um, from my perspective, you have to be deserving of that trust somehow. So whether that means good communication, whether that means making sure your customer knows that you're listening, or sending little freebies or having little programs, whatever that may be. From my perspective, like many things in life, including your relationship with your customers, a relationship. So how do you treat it like that to build community?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's rewind the clock. So where'd you grow up and what were you like as a child?
I grew up in Houston, Texas. What I was like as a child, I don't know, probably what I'm like today, but maybe just bigger. I think I was always probably very curious. I always like to build things. I I think maybe in life just too, I'm like always I'm interested. I'm interested in lots of things and kind of where my interests take me. Um, Sometimes they're productive. So this company probably is a more productive one. But I think as a kid, I always liked to build and I always liked to tinker.
And I think when I was doing my research, I found that your dad is a robotics engineer for NASA. And I'm like, wait, what? I need to learn more about that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I will say it was fun growing up. Yeah, we grew up in Houston, Texas, in Clear Lake, and it's this little community started for basically like NASA employees. So growing up, it's really fun. I would get to go to my dad's lab at NASA. He started the robotics program there back in the 80s and 90s. So
Wow.
I would get to see like kind of early prototypes of robots that he was building, and he would get them to talk to us and stuff like that. So that is probably where I got the desire to like build and tinker. Like my dad was like always doing that. He was, he didn't like our satellite dish or in our house, so he built one himself. Stuff like that. And I've always been the same. I've always thought there was an interesting approach. I tend to want to build it myself or do it myself.
That's so cool. All right. So what led you to University of Texas, Austin to study psychology?
Yeah, that's good question. What led me there was I probably didn't know what I wanted to do early on.
Mhm.
Like when I was like 17 or 18, I think for me, psychology was the only thing I could think I was really interested in was I was generally interested in people. Like I was interested in how people thought and why they made the decisions they did and all of those different things. So psychology seemed like a natural fit for me. Um, and I was planning on seeing if there was anything else that I liked better, but nothing ever took from me. I was always deeply interested in how people thought and kind of, process things as people. And UT was just, um, if you grew up in Texas, you go to Texas, you go to UT, you go to A&M, you go to Rice. And for me, um, I was really interested in liberal arts probably more than anything. And it seemed like University of Texas had the best liberal arts program. So that's kind of what led me there.
All right. So what'd you do after?
I was really lucky. My interests in UT were a little bit of everything. But one of the one of my interests when I was studying in school was philanthropy, or trying to do good somehow. I was involved a little bit with the Clinton Global Initiative. I was involved with other nonprofits, all of that stuff. Um, and I had decided after college I wanted to do a year of AmeriCorps. Basically, I wanted to do Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. When you're 18, 2 years seems like an eternity. So I decided to go with AmeriCorps because it was a 1 year commitment. So I did that with Habitat for Humanity. And, also during that time, I got connected, which was back then a really small company called Tom's. Um, Tom's at that point was like a 10 or 15 person company in Santa Monica that no one had ever heard of. And, had a couple of YouTube videos, but I, found them at Clinton Global Initiative and thought they were really interesting. So during that time after college, I also took an internship with Tom's and kind of discovered the world of social entrepreneurship. And for me, I was like fascinated. It felt like a coming together of a lot of the things I cared about.
Yeah, which I was like, wow, early 15th employee, I think it was of Tom's.
Yeah, yeah. When I got there as an intern, there was like 15 full-time people.
Yeah.
They had just hired their first HR representative. It was, I think she was like in her 30s or 40s, and she was like the oldest person in the room. And
Wow.
Tom's wasn't anything. It was actually just like a warehouse with no AC when I started there. But they were some of the funnest times I had too. They had such a rich culture and really good people.
Yeah, so you had different roles throughout your career at Tom. So I did want to talk about that and just the overall experience of the company. And, it just has such a reputation in terms of the founder, Blake, and building that, social entrepreneurship. And I read his book, Start Something That Matters, which was amazing. So what was it like working for the company?
It was honestly probably some of the funnest years in my career, and lots of honestly my best friends today are from Tom's. And that's the case with other Tom's people. Lots of their best friends are from Tom's, just because it was such a built-in community. Um, they were really fun years because the term everyone used was like building the plane while flying it. And it definitely felt like that. It was a rocket ship, and what it allowed me to do is I got to have like 4 or 5 different jobs while I was there. So I got to learn like all parts of the business, in a really unique way. And I'd say like before Tom's, I probably didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. It wasn't like a term I had heard growing up. Uh, but Blake was really about, again, starting things, and again, starting things that mattered. So I think that's probably where I picked up the bug too. Like while at Tom's, lots of us. So it's not even just me. There's actually lots of other Tom's alumni that went off to start successful, cool companies. Um, just with that thing in mind, like how do you start something that can do good, but also, hopefully be profitable and grow at scale.
Well, since you were so early at the company and the different roles that I noticed that you had, Tom's is known for, the one for one program. Buy a pair of shoes, we'll donate a pair of shoes. So it seemed like you were part of that. Like, were you one of the people that created that program?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was one of the people that created that program, but I was someone that got to be early on involved in building that program. So when I started, Tom's had a giving department, and it was just one other person in the giving department. So I think I was the second hire in their giving department. And the approach we had there was, Tom's wasn't trying to reinvent anything, or trying to be a best in class nonprofit. What they did do is they worked with best in class nonprofits. So a lot of my time there was managing our nonprofit partners in the giving program. I dove into statistics and analytics in terms of how to make our programming better, and grant management, stuff like that. And again, as I grew in the company too, my roles kind of shifted. So I started in the giving team. At the end of my career, I moved into kind of like an incubator that Blake started, basically to launch new cool ideas, which was really fun. He's like a very innovative guy, so getting to like pitch wild and crazy ideas and figure out how something could work was like probably the most fun job I had for years. Like I was like, man, I couldn't think of anything better I want to do than this. It was like a blast.
Yeah, because I read his book and I just always assumed Tom's was his only thing. Far from it. So when I was just doing research for our conversation, I was reading his Wikipedia page and I was like, wait, he's had multiple companies before and some exits and then Tom's and then, it's amazing to see what he was able to accomplish. And, obviously to have that social entrepreneurship element of Tom's was extraordinary too.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the thing with Blake. If you have a chance to meet him, you can kind of instantaneously tell he's an entrepreneur. He loves to start things. He has really great ideas. He listens to the people around him. And I think Tom's is one of those things where um, he was able to build a brand driven so much off of community too, because he had that same understanding of like how to treat customers and building a relationship with, I think, how he ran the company, the culture we had, and again how he treated his customers. Um, Maybe it was apparent outside, but it was really apparent inside too when you work for them.
Now you talked about, it was a great experience and developed amazing relationships. What were some of the key takeaways of things that you learned while, flying the plane at the same time while you're building it?
You, maybe the things I've learned, probably nothing is permanent. when you're building something, I think people always think of like, I'm going to build this program and it's going to last like 3 years, 5 years, all of these different things. And the nature of like a company is that it's like a living organism and change is part of what is happening all the time. So like when I first started there, I would always build and I would always want projects to live for years. And when I realized it's like, that's like pretty rare for projects. Lots of projects live for like, a few months, 6 months, like a year tops. And that's okay. Like the goal for any company is to constantly iterate, to constantly be better. So it is to have a grand plan today and it's to roll out your best version of it. And then in a year to realize all of the things you could have been doing better and to scrap it with no, attachment to what was built before. But like I think a phrase that was used at Tom's a lot that I liked was aggressive continuous improvement. And that feels very true for all startups. Like, how do you constantly aggressively improve on everything you're doing today? Your best ideas today doesn't mean like they're the best ideas tomorrow. And can you adapt to everything that's happening all the time? So I think I learned that skill set well at Tom's. Like more than anything, I'm a very adaptable person because I realized like things change and you roll with it or some degree it rolls over you. So it's just always be flexible and to kind of receive what's happening that day.
All right, well, let's talk about Thousand. What is the company you're building and what is the inspiration behind it?
Sure, yeah. Company I'm building today is called Thousand. A little bit of my story is actually connected to Tom's in the sense that it was inspired by the person who hired me at Tom's. um, but I was, I've been a long time cyclist. I rode my bike to Tom's as a commuter, and I was a recreational cyclist on the weekends. Never wore a helmet during that time. Just kind of thought they were goofy looking. But a friend and mentor of mine who actually hired me at Tom's passed away from a bad accident. He was riding around New York City, wasn't wearing a helmet, and got into a head first crash and passed away in impact. And really, after that incident happened, I knew I had to just be responsible to myself and people around me. So I went out to find a helmet I actually wanted to wear. I found a bunch of things that were passable looking, nothing I really wanted though, like that I wanted to wear. And I think I just ended up biking less, just because I'm not a hardcore 50-mile rider. I'm a commuter. I'm a recreationalist. And because of my background at Tom's, my thought was, if you can help make a helmet people actually want to wear, I think you can help save lives. Um, and more than that, I think you can connect people better to their cities. I was really interested in alternative mobility, how people could get out of their cars, how to reduce carbon emissions. But when I looked into the research of why people didn't take alternative transportation, even though most trips in the US are under 3 miles, it's because they didn't feel safe. So Thousands started with that mission in mind, like how do we help save lives and how do we connect people to their cities better?
All right, so you have this idea, and sorry to hear, as far as your colleague there, um, but obviously to take that and build something that's meaningful is quite amazing. How did you get started though? It's not like you have an industrial design background, right? Like to build this is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, again, I credit Tom's to it in the sense of because I had like 4 or 5 jobs while I was there. One of my jobs was launching like basically a shoe line for a giving program at one point. Like we made different types of shoes for our giving program based on like location and customer need and all of that stuff. Because of it, I learned product development and project management. So when I decided to start Thousand, I felt lucky in the sense of I kind of knew how to start. I knew how to budget. I knew what the product development timeline would be. I knew what the cycle would be. I knew how to kind of roughly talk and work with manufacturers. For me, it was just trying to find good partners that believed in the mission. So it was trying to find an industrial designer who was willing to work on spec because I didn't have like cash up front to give him. Um, it was working to try to figure out how to build a brand. So, I did something called friend lancing where you ask all your friends to help you for little money or no money lots of times. And for me, I learned just to cobble it all together. So again, I was fortunate enough that my career at Tom's was building and launching stuff at the end of the day. So I was like pretty familiar with it. Um, So I kind of just took all the skill sets I had there and I applied it to building Thousand. I don't think I expected it to take off so quickly. For me, it was like a side project that I was planning on doing out of my garage, but overnight it turned into a company. So it was
Well,
a
and I
fun
think
journey for me.
that's an important part too, is that this was nights and weekends while you're still employed at Tom's getting this started. So I think that's an important part of the story too.
Yeah, when I launched our Kickstarter project, again, I was working on this nights and weekends while I worked at Tom's. I launched the project while I was at Tom's, and I was trying to raise 20K to pay for the initial down payment on my molds. And then I was going to order inventory, and really, I was just going to sell them out of my garage and just like have this be a side gig. But I think I raised 20 grand in my first day, and I could tell I was tracking to do like couple 100,000 like by the time this campaign was done. So within 10 days of the campaign, I had kind of told myself, if you can get this amount of money, you should really just quit your job and try to do this full time. And I think that did happen. Like when I looked at kind of where our fundraising was going for the Kickstarter campaign, I realized like I was going to have enough money to pay for my tooling and maybe a little bit of the inventory. So I think I gave notice like during my Kickstarter campaign um, to go build Thousand. But I will say, like Tom's people being Tom's people, they were incredibly supportive. Blake himself, like when he found out everything, the Christmas gift that year to all Tom's employees were Thousand helmets.
Ah,
So
that's awesome.
so yeah, for me, I for sure got catapulted into launching a company. I wasn't really planning on like launching this like as a full out company. It was supposed to be a side gig that got they got more traction than I thought. And ever since it's been a ride to keep on.
Well, another, and maybe this was because of the Tom's experience, but there's the design piece, which we talked about. Then there's the manufacturing piece, right? Which that's can be a really a trip up for a lot of founders.
Yeah, and we're no exception different. It was definitely a trip up for us. We had lots of manufacturing issues. I think I mentioned it in the beginning, even with our Kickstarter. Um, we were delayed a long time, and I personally went over to our factories for a couple months, and I just lived out of our factories trying to get us back on track. And I would say that's probably par for the course when you launch anything new. Like first run productions are always challenging. But anytime you're trying to launch something innovative or hasn't been done before, there's going to be hiccups because there's nothing to reference.
Mhm.
So um, I would say lots of entrepreneurship and lots of manufacturing is the same, where it's constant problem solving until you realize like you're at kind of the thing you were trying to make.
And then how did you get going beyond the Kickstarter program of getting customers, and were you purely direct to consumer, or did you start to explore wholesale, retail? Like, so what was your strategy to get started at that point?
Yeah, for us, like I think in the very beginning, it was clear that like it wasn't just a product from my perspective, it was a brand. Like I always really wanted to set up a brand platform where Thousand could be more than just a bike helmet. Like our goal was always to expand at one point. So early on, I think we set up lots of marketing channels. We set up like how can we do more on email? How can we do more for PR? How can we do more for SEO? It was a while before we took on paid and all of that stuff, but it was kind of building marketing channels one by one. And same on the wholesale side. I think in the beginning, when we launched, it was 2015, 2016. So it was cool at that point only to do D2C. Um, but we had this perspective of wanting to meet customers wherever they were at, and lots of times at stores. So we worked with really great wholesale partners at the very beginning. My perspective was always just to be at the best stores where customers could discover you. And it was great for retailers because we were a new brand that had, good, that was trending. So we sent customers to them and vice versa. Like our customers could discover them in store. And we, worked with great partners and still work with great partners like REI. So I think my perspective of how to scale distribution has always been like, where is your customer going to find you the most naturally? Sometimes it's stores, sometimes it's online, but it's not to be, for me, like to only say you're going to do one channel forever, like it's maybe too specific. It's saying like you're only allowing your customer to shop for you in one place. from my perspective, it's like, how do you meet the customer where you're at while making sure you can work with really great distribution partners?
Now, one of the brilliant ideas you had when creating this helmet is the anti-theft innovation, where I'm like, wow, it is shocking that that was never thought of. So, explain how that idea came to fruition and what that, guarantee is all about.
Yeah, we have something great in our helmets called our pop lock. So for our logo mark, you can actually pop it out and throw a bike lock or U-lock through it, and lock it up to your bike. And if your helmet's ever stolen, we actually just replace your helmet for free. Um, I think that came from just understanding the natural pain points of the customer. We really weren't ever trying to, when we talked to customers, no one really cared about them having Bluetooth in their helmets, or they didn't care about something that was, that was a couple of ounces lighter than something else. What people really cared about as a big tenant was convenience. So being able to leave your helmet behind after you've ridden somewhere was, one of the things people talked about a lot. So I think we really designed something in mind for that experience. How do you leave it behind in a really easy way? And if it's ever stolen, more than anything, too, we offer peace of mind. But I think from the beginning, we were always trying to design around customer pain points. Because at the end of the day, again, for me, it's a relationship. How do we solve a problem for our customer?
When you talk about the replacement guarantee, and there's also, you had this mission and you hit it as, saving 1,000 lives by making helmets that people actually want to wear. And then you'll replace, if you get in an accident, you'll replace the helmet too if it gets damaged.
Yeah, I'd say that's we're best in class, and I think we probably are the only helmet manufacturer that does that in the U.S. If you're ever in an accident or a crash, we actually replace your helmet 100% for free. We pay for shipping, and it's lifetime for us. And what's been exciting for us is that's part of where our name came from. 1,000 was to help try to save 1,000 lives. And last year we actually crossed that milestone. So through our accident replacement policy, we've documented that over 1,000 people we've sent replacement helmets to, which has been super impactful. This year, I was just talking to our CX person. I think this year already we've already done 40. So for me, it's one of those things that it comes back down to how do you community build it, but how do you treat your customers right at the end of the day.
How do you decide to start to expand? So you have, the helmets for adults, then you expand into kids, toddlers, and then you have accessories, right? So sometimes you can start, it gets too involved, right? There's too many moving parts where the core of what you started out to do was very profitable and successful, but then all of a sudden you expand and it's like, oh, that could be another trip up for entrepreneurs.
I think when we thought about category expansion, there's probably two ways we could have gone. We could have decided we're going to be a helmet manufacturer. So we're going to go into ski helmets, skate helmets, mountain bike helmets, all of those different things. Or, and I think that would have been one approach. Many people take that approach once they develop a specialization, they see what other kind of categories they can enter into. I think our approach, again, maybe a theme of our company has been more consumer centric. When we talked to many of our customers, the one thing we realized was lots of them are first time riders. So they really, more than anything, as first time riders for e-bikes or e-scooters or any of these different things, were looking for a kit. They didn't need just the helmet, they actually needed lights and they needed a bag and they needed all of these other things. So our perspective became then, can 1,000 be we called it tools for urban travelers brand. If you're not in your car or you're not on your feet, can we help make tools to help you move around? So it all became, the conversation became more about share of closets of people, going deeper with our customers versus trying to expand into many different categories. For us, and for us, it's a strategic decision, just because I think we're such a consumer first brand. It's always been about like, how do you service this customer that we already have versus trying to gain share in markets maybe we're not as familiar with.
Is something I picked up along the way was like, oh wow, Gloria is part of this cycling industry that tends to be very like male dominated, and but I mean, when I think of your product, I don't think of the cycling industry as the hardcore cyclist, right? So you have a different customer. You're going after more of a broader consumer that is like me, that needs a helmet, but I don't want that shape looking thing on my head. I want something that's way cooler like you have. So, which is a much larger market than the hardcore cycler.
Yeah, I'd say maybe two things. I would say, again, we started with a mission of helping save 1,000 lives. So I would say, even from a market perspective, we weren't even going after people who already wore helmets. We were going after folks who didn't wear helmets.
Hmm.
So, and if you think about it, that's a much bigger market. How do you get people who don't want to wear helmets today to wear a helmet? And lots of the ways we designed and lots of the ways we move within that kind of mindset is like, how do we be really inclusive? We've always said, like, how do we get more people under the tent?
Hmm.
And for us, that's been, inclusivity within the way we do the sizing of our helmets, our fit system and our head forms and our shapes, but also the color offerings and the styles that we offer. Like, everything we do is very probably gender neutral, and like non-specific to age. And, that's all on purpose. Like, at the end of the day, we believe writing is for everyone. So it's been to be able to build really inclusive products. And I think that shows up in our demographics too. Like, we're really evenly split from a gender perspective, age range, where, our bell curve is like that across every age range category. Um, and same from a racial demographic too. Like, we have a much broader spectrum than probably traditional cycling brands do. And largely it's because I don't think we're speaking to existing cyclists all the time. I think we're just speaking to people who like to ride. And that segment is super broad.
And you talked about you got started with the Kickstarter program, um, but over time, like how have you continued to fund the business outside of sales? Like, have you raised capital? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, I'd say early years we bootstrapped the business. So again, probably in a time that was very popular to raise money as a D2C brand. We started we started with an idea of just trying to be profitable and to grow the business off of cash flow. So that's what we did probably for the first like 5 years, for like 3, 4, 5 years. Then when we really had some growth initiatives in mind where we really needed capital to grow, so from a product or a team perspective, that's when we did begin to raise capital. So I'd say for the first few years, largely we had a bootstrap mentality, and in the past few years, yeah, we have decided to raise larger rounds of capital, more than anything, to kind of fuel this vision we have of how do we become that #1 tools for urban travelers brand, and how do we build a product assortment that we're really, really proud of.
Well, I'm sure, kind of looking back, when you could have raised capital earlier on, when that was a thing that a lot of D2C brands were doing, but versus what you did of building a solid foundation with good business fundamentals focused on profitability. I'm sure the investors, when they looked at your business, was like, wait, we have a real product, a real brand, a real business in terms of financial viability here, that they were more apt to say, yes, this is a business we want to be involved with.
Yeah, if I'm honest, when we raised, it was actually much easier to raise because people, one, were like surprised we had never raised before, just because we had grown to a certain level without any capital. But they knew we understood the economics of the business at that point too, because it's we had made the thing run with cash flow, and we had balanced operating expenses and COGS and all of that other stuff. And I think, if I'm honest, like, it wasn't that we had foresight. We didn't raise at the beginning because we had more foresight or more like anything than probably other founders. If I'm honest, I literally didn't know what I would do with the money. Like, if we did raise money, again, we were getting by with operating on cash flow. So um,
Facebook
there were
ads.
other reasons.
That's what you would have done with the
Yeah,
money.
and we didn't. That's the thing. And probably we didn't do Facebook probably for the first 4 years of the business when everyone was like scaling crazy on Facebook. But we weren't. Um, and again, I wouldn't credit us with more foresight than anyone else. I would just say, like, when people asked us why we hadn't raised capital or we weren't, like, the answer was like, we don't know what we're going to do with it. We don't have a grand plan to try to beat X, Y, or Z. We can't see why we need to grow faster than other people. We're really differentiated. We're in this niche. So when we made a conscious decision to raise capital, it was for a really specific purpose. But I think everyone's journey is a little bit different in this. I think the one thing maybe I've learned in all this process is to not listen to anyone about anything when it comes to raising money. Like, everyone has a different path they want to build their company on. And there's an option for that, whether it's venture, whether it's private equity, whether it's debt, getting an SBA loan, or just being so tight with inventory and cash that you can just turn it quickly and not pay yourself for years. It just really depends on what you want to do at the end of the day with that.
All right, so looking ahead, what do you see as the future for 1,000?
For me, like, I think what's exciting is that mobility has fundamentally changed. And the way infrastructure is built in this country also needs to fundamentally change. I think I mentioned that like the majority of the trips in the US are under 3 miles. But weirdly enough, we're all driving around in our cars to get places. And you see more people getting e-bikes and e-skateboards and e-scooters to get around. And for me, I'm excited to be a part of that movement. So for me, I'm like, how do we get more infrastructure built in the US that is conducive to the way people actually want to get around, but is difficult right now? And how can Thousand be a part of that journey? How can we service those riders who are trying to get around, not again, not in a car and not on their feet?
All right, so what advice would you give to an entrepreneur that's looking to start a consumer company like you have?
That's a good question. Probably follow your gut is like the piece of advice I got really early on, like within the first couple of months of starting Thousand, that's still really stuck with me. When decisions feel really hard at the end of the day, like when I don't follow my gut, that's the times um I beat myself up over it the most, and times I do follow my gut are the times I sleep better at night. And more often than not, it feels like I've made the right call when I kind of follow my gut. So I would definitely say that.
All right, how do you balance your time? Like I read in one of the other articles or listened to one of the podcasts that you've been on that, you have a very high work ethic, but that wasn't always the answer to getting what you needed to get done. So how do you balance your time?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, in the beginning, I would say for years, um, I thought my competitive advantage was that I could outwork everyone because I am a dog with a slipper in that way. Um, but I think in this last couple of years, my perspective on that has changed where it's really how do I add value to the business in only ways that I can uniquely do? And that doesn't necessarily mean working 80 hours all the time on the nitty-gritty things. Like it is like, how do I really think through a product in a way that's going to be impactful to our customers? How do I think through our marketing or our digital channels in a way that we can scale better? Um, how do we how do we build a new distribution partner that that we can grow with in the future? So for me, it's maybe more thinking through like what are my unique strengths and how do I prioritize my time around using my unique strengths rather than just trying to outwork everyone around me all the time. And sometimes it's both, but I think the latter has helped me have a lot more balance in life.
All right, what are 3 apps you can't live without? And it can't be like Gmail, Calendar, and Slack.
Oh, but those are the ones. I'd say this in terms of like even finding balance. One that I've been liking lately is I downloaded this app called Paired. My husband and I have heard like traveling a lot in different time zones or whatever like that. So it's like something to help us stay connected. It asks you questions or you play a game or a quiz every day. And, it's something to talk about. And I feel like I've known him for a long time and we know everything about each other, but with this app, I've been learning new little things. So that one's been fun.
Very cool. How about a book or podcast recommendation for entrepreneurs?
You know what? I'll say like a book that I have always felt inspired by as an entrepreneur for folks is Let My People Go Surfing by Jan Chivard of Patagonia. So I feel like that's been a really fun business book for me to read, just because he built Patagonia with the long term in mind. I don't think he was ever trying to sell to private equity or do X, Y, and Z. Like he had a mission and, he grew a billion-dollar brand by just focusing on the fundamentals over decades. And for me, that's inspiring.
Very cool. All right, what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I I love design outside of work. So right now that applies probably to my house a lot. So I'm super into interior design and I've always got like a project or a construction thing going on at my house. Um, but again, for me, it's like probably a way to tinker without without having to mess with the business too much.
Very cool. Well, Gloria, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work you and your team at Thousand are up to, and obviously all the great advice.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I appreciate the time today. It's been fun.